Okay, welcome to another vintage fishing reel service and repair video. In this episode, we're going to be working on a Shakespeare number 1761 model FB. So that would make it a 1959. So it's a Shakespeare spin wonder reel number 1761 model FB, first produced in 1959. And this is another one of the underspins. This one is a right hand retrieve, which I don't like for underspins. I'm right-handed, but I like to use the right hand for casting and the left hand for winding when it's an underspin. So this is another one, of course, without a button. So in this case, you wind this way. To release the line, you turn backwards, and of course this thing needs some work, lubrication and so on, so I don't think it's quite working properly. Now this one, look at that beautiful knob on that handle. I assume, again, bakelite, and it's got these neat marble streaks in it. And this thing, the reel's in great condition. I mean, there's a scratch there, maybe a few along here, but other than that, this is in beautiful condition. But there was some kind of a brass type alloy or something that's covered in this nickel or chrome or whatever plating, but these had a tendency, whatever that alloy was, to corrode something terrible, and this thing was froze solid. And the last thing I wanted to do was break that beautiful marbled green and white bakelite knob. So this one had to soak in WD-40 for a couple days, still would not move. So I wrapped a towel around it and very gently took a pair of pliers and just tried to slowly work it back and forth, not bearing down too hard and cracking that. And it slowly started to turn, and then eventually I could get it to spin around. And then I just sat in my easy chair and spun and spun and spun, put more WD-40 in, spun and spun and spun, and wiped out all the goop that was coming out, and I've got it turning really good now. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so as with most of these, I'm going to actually, first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this line stop ring here. Save that for another day. And then remove the cap. This is one of those, again, where the drag is operated by tightening down the cap. And then there's a a felt drag washer in there that puts pressure on the spool. And there's actually a tension spring in here that keeps the spool up to keep it from falling all the way down against the body. And then for drag, when you tighten and when you torque this down, it presses down on that spool and creates your drag. So let's see. Looks like this slot here is big enough. We can get a penny in there. No, so I might have to use a screwdriver on this one. We'll get the nut off here. And looks like there might be a washer on there. Maybe not. No, I guess that's just the shaft of the thing. Okay, it's coming. It's just grease bound. There it comes. So that's got some nasty caked on grease in there. And the spool came off really nice. And so here you can see the line pickup mechanism. It's more of like a hook than it is a pin. And looks like it's got a little tensioner spring there. Ain't much Ain't much spring to it. It's like a piece of paper. Okay, so I'll put that in the parts tray, and we got to get rid of this line. There, now that's ready for the parts tray. There's the sort of a tension spring slash drag clicker. So you've got this textured side on the bottom of the spool, and when it runs against that, it lets you know your drag is being used. So now I think I'm going to go ahead and pull off this side plate here first. Recognizing that I've not had good luck with the screws on these Shakespeare, so hopefully we don't snap any of these off. Opening these up is sort of like opening a geode. You never know what you're going to find inside there. I like to find old crusty grease. I enjoy cleaning them out and getting them like new again. I'm always a little disappointed when it's been recently serviced. I like to think it's been the first time it's been serviced in ages. Whoa, that's interesting. What kind of a chuck wagon fuzz and stuff is in there? I mean, that looks like hair or fuzz. I don't know what's going on in there. It's fuzzy. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's crystallization. No, it's some kind of a fuzz. Maybe somebody put it in there with a Q-tip or something. That's Q-tip fuzz. Might very well be. Okay, so we're going to take off the other side plate. Put this in the parts tray. Yuck, I see something that looks like rotting plastic associated with that anti-reverse or whatever this is. Clicker, yeah, anti-reverse. We'll see what that is here in a minute. And out comes the main gear. Then you've got a little tensioner spring here, which I'm going to bend up a little bit. It's probably a little bit sprung. And then there's like a pad on there because that rides against the back of your main gear. There's a little felt pad there that you can grease. And then this is the anti-reverse cogs here. And then this thing is the thing that I thought looked, yeah, well, I thought that looked like plastic, but I could be wrong. That might just be oxidation on there. When I scratch it, it looks metallic, but it sure looks almost white, almost like plastic, but I think it's just oxidation. I think that is in fact metal. So I am not going to take that off and monkey with this spring and chance losing that or messing it up, because there's no real reason to, because there's space in between there and I can lubricate that so on without having to take off that apparatus, that anti-reverse apparatus. So that's ready for the parts tray. Now we've got to clean off this, whatever this fuzz is, this greasy fuzz, and see, let's hope it's like an E-clip or a pin or something rather than that other method that I had to deal with in an earlier video where it was basically like a a clip that you really had a hard time getting on and off. You basically almost had to bend the thing. Let's just see if I can clean this off well enough to see what's going on here. Hopefully by 1959 they figured out a better way. Oh yes, so this is basically just like a cotter pin type deal, I think, or whatever you call that. So, whoops, it's basically like a cotter pin type. I think that's what you call that type of pin. There isn't a hole in it. It just fits around a slot. And put your finger there so you don't pop it clear across the room. There it comes. Okay, so it's not the kind of pin. It's basically just kind of a clip. So that ought to get us the pinion gear off. I'm going to lay that there so I don't lose it. And then off comes the pinion gear, which is keyed, a square hole basically. And it looks pretty symmetrical. I don't see any difference in one side versus the other. There's no groove or anything. But basically that I'm going to remember that these scratches go face towards the rear of the reel, and the shiny side faces toward the front of the reel. So the shiny side goes towards the front. This dull and slightly scratched up side goes towards the rear of the reel. And that should allow us, or not. Let's see, what do we got going on here? Oh, there it comes. That allows us to get our... Oh, okay, that's a new one for me. That allows us to get our axle shaft out, but recognizing that there is at least one washer there. Shim washer or something. So I have to remember that when you put that axle shaft back in, you got a washer between the body and the pinion gear. Yeah, I've never seen one of these come out like that. Usually they're pressed in there, but that just slides out like that, I guess. And that little notch there rides on that point. So that notch rides on this point here, like that. And then there's a piece of felt washer that goes over that shoulder there. So that can go in the parts tray. And there's another washer here. Just one. And it looks to be the exact same dimensions, etc., as the one on the other side. So this was the one that was here, and this is the one that's on the other side. They both look exactly the same. So one goes here, and one goes on the other side between the body and the pinion gear. Well, that was pretty quick, pretty painless. Body is free of all parts except for the lever. That's on the side plate, actually, the lever that runs the anti-reverse. So you know what that means? That means it's time to take all these crusty, greasy parts and run them over to the sink and scrub them heavily with a toothbrush and some dishwashing liquid under some hot water. Rinse out any grit and grease. Put some WD-40 in the tougher areas of grease and in the journals where the shafts go, and get a cotton swab in there and clean those out good. And we'll be back just like that. And so now we're ready to start reassembling. Now, one of the interesting things that I discovered when I was cleaning this out is there's a big, and I still didn't get it all, there's a big patch of hardened grease over here. And in that patch of hardened grease was stuck a little felt pad. And that little felt pad, and it's shiny on one side. So that tells you that you can see it kind of has a shine to it. That's glue. So apparently they glued those on. That felt pad's supposed to go on this little tensioner spring or whatever the heck that is. I assume that's what it's for, is to provide tension between the spool and the spinner head. So, you know, I don't know what kind of glue I want to use there, but I think the most appropriate would be this goop, because it kind of remains somewhat elastic, maybe a little bit more reversible if necessary in the future. So I'm just going to dab a bit of this on the original side where they originally had the glue, and I'm gonna maybe a little bit more. I'm gonna just re-adhere that where it came from. And I suspect that sets up relatively fast. I mean, it's not completely set up, but it'll start to harden here pretty quick, so I can still button up this reel reasonably quickly. Okay, now I want to go through the main gear shaft and axle shaft and see that. I mean, that's some of that's scratches, but there often is residual grease, and if you can get rid of any of that, there's just that much greater likelihood that it's going to operate even more smoothly. Why not, while you're in there, polish those up? Those are the places that can make a reel a little bit stiff, is where those shafts write in the journals. And then I'm probably about ready for a new piece of steel wool, or at least break this one up. They shine up real nice, and then there's some residual grease here. See how nice that polishes up with just a little bit of fine steel wool. Oh, that's pretty. That's pretty. What else? That looks good enough. Yeah, there's a little bit of residue right there. Alright, I'm gonna, oops, there's still some hard grease there. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and oil the main gear shaft, and probably put a little bit of grease here on the cogs for the clicker, and then around the back side, because somewhere along that back side that little tension spring makes contact and slides around there. Just make sure my anti-reverse works. I'm going to turn that back off now. And ready for our handle here to kind of lock all that down. And I'm seeing right now, so someone has lost the lock washer. And it's the way I can tell is not only have I seen them on other Shakespeare's like this, but you can see the scars, the little tooth marks from that lock washer, and that was not present. Oh no, there it is. Okay, my bad. It's stuck inside the depression in the nut, so it is in fact still there. So we'll get this nut threaded. Okay, now that this is easily accessible, go ahead and grease the teeth on there, and seeing how this one is not an oscillating reel, we don't have to worry about putting any grease in the middle. You only need as much grease as you need and no more. And I'm going to put a little bit of oil in the pivot points on the anti-reverse pawls. I've already greased the main gear shaft, so I didn't forget that. I could probably put a little bit of oil here on the lever that operates the anti-reverse, and just double check, make sure that's working. And then you can wipe off the excess. And while we're here, and before I forget, even though I've already had some penetrant in here and probably even some oil, I'm going to go ahead and just re-lubricate this with a drop of oil. You see the green? That's that brass-like, that's the corrosion from that brass-like alloy that seized this thing up. The oil goes in clear, and instead of coming out black like in a lot of them where it's just grease and stuff, it's coming out green from that copper alloy that's in there. Alright, so now we can throw this piece on, and I don't think it needs any because it doesn't move, but I think I'm going to first of all clean that up a little bit with steel wool, and then probably just throw a little grease on there for you know what and giggles. Axillary shaft. And don't forget, we've got a washer that goes on there first. There. And then one here on the other side. Okay, so remembering that I don't know if it makes any difference or not, but in general it's a good idea to put it back the way you found it. Sometimes if you had a broken tooth or something on one end of it where it made sense to flip it over, and there was no indication that flipping it over would be an issue if it's perfectly symmetrical, that's fine. But if the gears are all fine and otherwise, there's no real need to not put it on back the way you found it. So I'm going to take and put that pinion gear on over the square shaft, and then take my this little clip and my needle nose, and so I think the way it was on there, this is sort of a square shaft tip there, and I think the bend on either side of this, I think those bends go, I think you put it on so that those bends end up around the points of the square shaft. So now we're ready to put some grease on that. That fits on this side. Forgot this is right hand retrieve. Now let's see if we can get our screws tightened down without breaking them. Well, I mean, there's nothing else in there to deal with. Everything's lubed and so on. So I guess we're good to put the other side plate on. And we'll add a little bit of oil to this shaft and some grease to the spool shaft. And a little, maybe a little grease there and around here. And reattach the spool. I've tightened that drag clicker a bit, so that's working nicely. I'm going to go ahead and oil this pad, and that seems to be adhering much nicer now, so I don't think that's going to come off even after I reassemble it. Still a little caked on grease in here. Now oil this pivot point, and not much of that really touches, maybe right there. Most of that, there's a gap between the pickup pin mechanism and the top of the spinner head, so you don't necessarily need to gobble a bunch of oil in there. Well, there's the pickup pin going in, so that seems to be going in now. Let's button up this aspect and keep our fingers crossed that it's going to work properly now. Awful noisy. Well, that's because I don't have any tension on the spool. Even when the drag is pretty much zero, there'll still be some tension on the spool from that lip in that felt washer. So I think when we look at that, see how nicely that goes in and out now? Just not even a quarter of a turn, And that's moving in, and that pickup pin is moving in and out real nice. See that? So I think when we put this cover on, that it'll quiet down quite a bit. I've noticed this slapping going on before, and I'm not sure. You know, it's not doing it when the cap is off. It is to a certain extent. If I hold that spool down, it's not doing it. And then when I put this on, I'm hearing a clapping, flapping noise. That's happened on several more of these that I've. It's only when you wind really fast. It's almost like what's happening is that the centrifugal force is causing that pickup pin to fly out into the side of the, but I don't know if that's possible. And it's at maximum right now. Hear that? Now it's doing it even when I'm going slow. Unless it's hitting that dent right there. I go real slow, I don't hear it at all. As soon as I start speeding up, I hear it. The only thing I can think of is that I do see some shininess right here where that dent is, which may mean that it's hitting there. Maybe I just need to pop that dent out a little bit, and we'll see if that has anything to do with it. Okay, I popped the dent out. It's a little kind of a blunt punch in there with the hammer, and sure enough, that was the problem. That pickup pin was just hitting into that dent, and so now it's working like new and functioning in every way. So there you have it. A 1959 Shakespeare spin Wondereel, number 1761, model FB. Ready to go fishing and provide more enjoyment and lots more years of service. Okay, thanks for watching.